Most of the things that we do every day can be considered habits. And usually, what makes something a habit is when you repeatedly do something and it almost becomes automatic. And I think habits are really applicable when it comes to what we're saying about other people and what we're saying about ourselves. Have you ever thought to yourself, like, how do the words that you're saying about yourself make you feel? And even, more importantly, how do the words that you're saying to other people affect how they feel? And, how do you use your words to indicate what you're feeling? And I think it's really important to think about the words that we're using because the words that we're using and the language that we're using have really huge implications for being able to express our feelings and have people understand us. So that's why today I think it's really important to talk about two words that you can remove from your vocabulary so that you can feel happier and more satisfied, and you can use your words to your advantage to communicate your feelings effectively. When you use your words, you are telling someone how you feel and what your experience is like. Emotional expression is the first form of self expression. For instance, if I tell you I'm exhausted, I'm tired, I'm run down, what does that tell you? Like, what can you conclude from that? Okay, he's not in the mood to talk. He's pretty tired. He's had a long day. He's not going to have the energy to give me. Let's take another scenario. Let's say I'm traveling out of the country. I'm in Canada or Mexico or somewhere really nice for vacation. And I'm talking to my friend on the phone, and my friend says, how's your trip going? How have the first couple days been? And I respond and I say, oh my gosh, it's been so great. It's beautiful. It's really green. Last night we went to this really exciting show, and today we have this really great tour coming up. So the other person hears the words that I'm using and describing to tell how my experience has been, and the other person is able to infer kind of the mood that we want to create together on the phone. And specifically, let's say your friend has some information that's maybe not good news. Based on me using positive words and me describing how great my vacation has been, they may or may not want to come forward with the information just because they don't want to sour my mood and they want to keep the mood light, right? And that's kind of the power that we have when we're using specific words, because we're telling people how to respond to us, whether we're doing it consciously or not. And being able to make distinctions in how people are feeling is partly why precision of language is so important when we're talking to people. And I think where we start to run into issues with communication and language is when we start making generalizations about people and ourselves based on patterns that we see. We start making generalizations based on what people's behavior tells us over time. The reason that we're doing ourselves and other people a disservice when we make assumptions and generalizations is because when we do that, we're depriving people of being able to use the communication to effectively communicate their needs and their feelings to us. That brings us to the first word that we can stop using that's going to improve our relationships and the way that we feel about ourselves. The first word that we can stop using is the word always. If you think about the word always, always is an extreme word. Always is 100% of the time. Always is every day, always correct, always is something happens without fail every single time. Every time you go to the office, every time you go to the gym, always is every time you meet your friends. And what you start to realize with the word always is that it kind of contradicts how we exist as humans every single day. Nothing that we do as humans is 100% of the time guaranteed. We have some variety in how we show up, and there's gonna be inconsistencies in our behavior because we're not robots. So, when your friend says, "Oh, you're always late. You are inconsiderate. You're always inconsiderate. You always don't care." And when they talk to you like that, you start to internalize that, and it doesn't leave you any room for improvement because they're saying you always do this every single time. And even if you know that you don't do that every single time, it makes you feel like you're being put in this box of how you're viewed. Take another example. Let's say you tell yourself, "Oh, my boss is always critiquing me." What that's going to do is then you're going to start to feel like that's what they always do because you're telling yourself they do. And so you start to believe it, even if they're not always criticizing you. Once they do, it's going to be magnified because you have already told yourself that that's what they're going to do. Using the word always reinforces false beliefs. If you have a classmate and your classmate says to you, "Oh, you always score better than me," well, two things are going to happen. One, your classmate is not entirely going to be motivated to do better because they're already telling themselves that you're going to score higher than them. And so they're kind of already feeling defeated because they're using that language to keep themselves down. And at the same time, what that language tells you is that you're going to put more pressure on yourself because they're telling you, "Oh, you always score better." So then you're going to keep feeling like you have to always score better because if you don't score higher than them, then what does that make you? And I think that's where the issue is when we start using words like always with people and always with ourselves, because we're limiting ourselves based off of that word that we're using to describe the situation. We are creating a limiting belief by speaking in extremes. With that being said, that brings us to the second word that you can take out of your vocabulary that is not beneficial. The second word is the word never. The word never is the exact opposite of always, but it has the same effect on our thinking. The word never is 0% of the time. The word never is not a single time, not once. The word never is at no point. When you think about the word never, that's also extreme. The word never doesn't leave any shades of gray. Never is just as extreme as always, but it's the opposite side of the spectrum, meaning you never do anything. When you start to think about the word never, you realize that it's almost always hyperbole or exaggeration. And what I mean by that is that when you use the word never, I think it's very rare that someone does something never or 0 times. You're usually using the word never to be accusatory and to make someone feel a sense of guilt, right? Like if you tell your partner, "Oh, you never take out the trash," or "Oh, you never clean the kitchen," and it's quite possible that they usually don't, but to say the word never is you're creating this extreme situation so that you're going to get a reaction out of your partner and they're going to feel guilted into doing something for you. And that's not beneficial for anyone because what you're doing is you're trying to create this perfectionistic expectation on someone by using the word never. That's why the words always and never operate in the same manner, because what they are doing is they are trying to uphold this perfectionism. And when you use the word always or never, you're trying to justify why someone's actions were less than perfect. And the same goes for the way you talk to yourself. When you say, "Oh, I never do well, I never am gonna succeed at this," or "This person always ignores me," you're trying to create an extreme of this is either black or white. This is all or nothing thinking. Someone does something perfect, and if they don't do it exactly in the way that I had envisioned, then it's not perfect and they never do something. And that's why it's unhelpful, because you are going to keep yourself stuck in these limiting beliefs about situations and about people, and you're going to place such high expectations on people because when they hear the word never, they are going to get defensive for one thing. And the second thing is they are going to feel like, oh man, this person doesn't really understand me because they're trying to make me seem like I never put in effort. And they're trying to create this really perfectionist, projection onto me. And I think that that's really harmful because you're creating distance between you and the people that you're trying to communicate with. In addition to trying to remove the words always and never from your vocabulary, there is something else that you can implement to try to combat this all or nothing thinking. And in psychology, there is a term, good enough. And essentially, good enough is something that you can use to describe situations and people's behavior so that there is room for improvement and there is shades of gray. So you're not trying to, uphold this perfectionism. And good enough essentially is, let's say we're referring to a person as good enough. What that means is that person is fair, that person is putting in some form of commitment, and that person is generally good hearted and they have good intentions. When we can start to view people and situations as good enough, we allow ourselves to let go of always and never because we can look at the situation objectively and say, okay, this person's putting in effort, this person's overwhelmed, they're busy, and it allows us to develop a sense of compassion that we wouldn't otherwise have because if we're always stuck in extremes, we're always going to be, we're keyword always, we're always going to be trying to pigeonhole ourselves and make ourselves smaller. And so what I would say is do your best to take always and never out of your vocabulary because I really think it's going to help you in your relationships and it's just going to make you happier so that you don't feel like you're let down and disappointed by people. And ultimately, it's going to let you kind of soften into life more and let go of needing everything to be aligned perfectly because perfect is not real. It doesn't exist. If this resonates with you or if you got some value out of this, definitely subscribe because we're going to have weekly videos and I really want you guys to tell me what topics you want me to cover and kind of discuss more. And, in the comments, let me know if there's other words that you feel like are just unhelpful or what do people say to you that makes you feel like off balance? And, specifically, what words can you use that you think would be helpful for people to communicate with you?